In our island and coastal region, harvesting the wealth of oceans is a tradition which Caribbean peoples have carried out for millennia. But in modern times, it is not enough just to catch fish and deliver it to shore. Markets are important, and increasingly, this means exports to international clients.
According to the Food and Agriculture Organization of the UN, in 2019, nearly 38% of global fish production was exported, accounting for 164 billion US dollars, just over 10% of the global agri-food trade.
In many developed regions, such as the EU, supplies from imports account for 60% of the fish consumption. Important countries with high demand for seafood will pay premium prices for good quality products, creating good export business opportunities for suppliers from developing countries and regions. However, selling into export markets often requires a different approach, which creates new challenges. The Caribbean Regional Fisheries Mechanism is a regional intergovernmental body providing technical support services to fisheries management and development in CARICOM countries. Peter Murray is advisor, fisheries management and development at the CRFM Secretariat.
Caribbean fisheries businesses that wish to break into international markets need to ensure that they meet the requisite standards to export to those markets. They should put in place the systems to satisfy the specific requirements so that their products can be exported.
These international standards, commonly referred to as sanitary and phytosanitary or SPS measures, address issues such as food safety and animal health. They set limits on harmful hazards such as heavy metals, but in many cases, they also require that products are produced under certain management systems, such as HACCP, the Hazard Analysis and Critical Control Point System. This is a set of standardized procedures for ensuring that food safety hazards in your product are actually under control during production. Small scale fishery business operators, especially those working in developing countries, often have difficulties in complying with such technical requirements imposed by regulations of the importing country. Ian Golden is president of the International Association of Fish Inspectors, a professional association for fish technologists which advises on scientific aspects of the international fish trade.
International standards applicable in the fish trade mostly concern issues of food safety, sometimes sustainability, but mostly food safety. And oftentimes these requirements are expressed in such a way that not only do they apply to the standards in the product, such as, for example, the level of organic mercury in fish, but also they require the application of management systems. And here we're talking about the hazard analysis and critical control point principle, or HACCP, which is a set of techniques and procedures which are applied at each point along the process to make sure that all the hazards are effectively under control at each stage. Another example is a requirement for a traceability system to be in place. And this, in fact, has been a requirement for food supplied to the EU market since 2002, that operators have such systems. And these require the operator to have in place data collection and storage systems to be able to trace back who supplied a product and to whom the product was supplied. And ultimately, this allows you to trace a value chain back to the origin and, in many cases, to the fishing vessel. And this allows you to identify the source of any problem in case a particular batch is subject to a food safety incident after it leaves the premises of the operator.
The CRFM is helping regional fishery business operators to comply with international standards with a view to gaining access to export markets. CRFM has produced a series of guidelines on how to ensure that fishery products are safe for human consumption. The guidelines are produced in French, English, Spanish, and Dutch languages and cover a range of different topics such as food safety in capture fisheries, aquaculture, HACCP systems, important food safety hazards, traceability, etc. Let us now have a closer look at one operator's experience in using these guidelines as the basis for a program to improve compliance with SPS measures. Renita Joseph is the owner and manager of Tibu Impex, a recent startup fish processing company in Georgetown, Guyana. This is one of hundreds of small fish trading and processing companies in the Caribbean region who have only limited capacities to trade outside the region. Due to the limited technical knowledge of key staff, the company has struggled to understand and develop modern approaches. For example, the company had no formal food safety management plan addressing the HACCP requirements. Neither did it have a traceability system nor make routine compliance checks on products and hygiene. As a result, until now, Tibu Impex has not been able to gain direct access to major markets such as EU and USA. Managers and employees had little experience of working in fish and food factories. For Tibu Impex, one of the early benefits of the guidelines was their use as source materials for a company's staff training program. With the help of consultants, the company's supervisory and QC staff were trained in sanitary operating procedures, hazards, basic microbiology, cleaning and sanitizing methods, water safety, personal hygiene, and the importance of keeping written records. Following the staff training, Tibu Impex embarked on a program of upgrading of food safety conditions over a 6-month period. Staff were trained on subjects such as correct uniforms like boots, coats, and head coverings, correct hand washing practices, as well as personal behavior and the need to report illnesses and infections. Staff applied the guidelines to put in place some of the key elements of a new food safety system based on the hazard analysis and critical control points concept, with proper record keeping of standard operating procedures, critical process variables, and traceability. In particular, new raw material checks were introduced. A key issue was that some of the fish species handled, such as kingfish, can produce the compound histamine when they spoil. This is a toxin which develops in tunas and mackerels held at too high temperatures and which can cause strong allergic type reactions in consumers. These species are now checked by Tibu staff to make sure that they meet the temperature specification on delivery from the supplier. New raw material reception forms were introduced to record relevant data, including the identity of the supplying trader or fishing boat for each batch of fish received. The HACCP plan also addressed other hazards identified in the regional fish species. In addition to histamine, risks associated with toxic heavy metals and the use of additives in shrimp had to be addressed. The new HACCP plan established a series of checks to control all of these hazards, including on-the-spot tests and lab tests where required. The new traceability system tracks product by placing a batch code on every item leaving the factory. The company keeps a record of which suppliers delivered which fish that day and links it to the final product batch codes, thus establishing one up and one down traceability. Another area for upgrading was cleaning and sanitizing the factory and its equipment. Previously, the use of detergents and chemicals was not standardized or monitored, and staff were not aware of the importance of ensuring correct concentrations in the use of hypochlorite to achieve optimal killing of bacteria. New cleaning procedures, rotas, and checklists were introduced and staff trained to ensure that the work was done correctly. The company was supplied with water from the state supply, but chlorination was found to be unreliable and the supply could not be considered safe. Company staff were trained to add the correct amount of hypochlorite to the water tanks and to check this using a colorimetric method to ensure that sufficient chlorine was present to make the water potable and fit for use in washing the fish. Renita Joseph again.
As a young company, we found the HACCP guidelines most useful in bringing our processing plant up to standard and in compliance with the international standards. We were made aware of good hygienic practices in the handling, processing, freezing, and transportation of fish. We were also made aware of the importance of record keeping. Little or no data was recorded. Today, we have all the necessary records for traceability, fish intake, cleaning, maintenance, etc. Using my company as an example, prior to the introduction of the CRFM program, we had no knowledge or saw ourselves potentially viable in the international market. However, with the introduction of these guidelines, we became knowledgeable of what is required to compete on the international market. If we are to assure consumers that their food is safe, as good science and technology allows, we have to follow these guidelines.
Randy Bacchus is a production supervisor for Tibu Impacts, who undertook training based on the CRFM manuals.
No, I didn't know much about food safety. As a result of this training, I now do a few more things different than I used to. Like, for example, I check the temperature of my fish and be careful with my grading and make sure all of my fish ice down properly. I do a lot of things now. I even treat my water and calibrate my instruments and so on. I expect that this would help me in the future by giving my customers an even better quality of fish.
Peter Murray, Advisor CRFM again.
The special publications are intended as guides to the food safety conditions required for fishery business operators producing for export, which are equally applicable to domestic trade. They provide structured guidelines to ensuring the safety of fish and fishery products for human consumption in terms of best practices and official controls. These guidelines respond to a need to extend good practices within the region for a sustainable fishery sector by production that meets food safety requirements, thus enhancing the industry's role and contribution within the blue economy, strengthening competitive advantage, product development, and value addition, and improving the overall profitability of fisheries and aquaculture.
So, thanks to the CRFM guidelines, fishery businesses in the Caribbean region, such as Tibu Impacts, now have proven resources for strengthening of staff knowledge and skills to produce good quality and safe products, which, importantly, reliably comply with the demands of the international market.